guys, welcome back to Qween of Cups. I'm Ophira.
I'm Ashera.
And today we are talking about some taboo subjects.
Sex and death, baby. Sex and death.
Yes. So we're filming this in early May. So May Day just passed, aka Beltane, aka May's Eve. And if you guys follow the Wheel of the Year at all, you know that this is a really interesting time of the year because it's about fertility. And it's the polar opposite of your favorite holiday, which is
Samhain.
Which is about death. So we're going to kind of talk about this concept of how those two things, like fertility and death, are two opposite sides of the same coin and how they tie together in witchcraft. So get geared up, pour yourself a drink. Today we are drinking some leftover Cinco de Mayo beverage here. And yeah, pour yourself a drink, pop some popcorn, and buckle in for some semi-awkward topics.
Hell yeah. So as Ophira mentioned, Beltane is one of the festivals on the Wheel of the Year. Its polar opposite is, again, my favorite, Samhain. And you know what? Beltane is pretty much up there too, because we touched on this a bit in our last podcast, that we both love the symbols that come with it. So with Samhain, you're seeing the leaves change, you're seeing things die and go to sleep for the winter, and that comes out with the colors and the leaves changing. And then, you know, it's just, at least here in Buffalo, New York, it's all snow and gray and brown, and the song California Dreamin' means a lot to everyone. And then all of a sudden we finally get to see flowers again, flowers that come out of the ground, like live ones and shit here.
Yes, our last video someone schooled us, which thank you. Yeah. Apparently crocuses and snowdrops are not the same thing. They just come up at the same time, and a lot of people have them in their yard at the same time. But snowdrops are the little, like, hung-over bell-shaped ones that are either white or purple, and I guess crocuses are like bigger and face up.
Yeah, they face up, and they're the first ones that pop out. I'm probably going to get a tattoo of one of those bad boys right under the cockroach at some point in time, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, Beltane, it's usually pretty close to Easter as well, and there's a reason for that, because Easter, contrary to popular belief, it's a fucking pagan holiday. Like, let's be real. Easter does not appear, the word Easter does not appear in the Older New Testament at all. And the way it's celebrated, it's like the Sunday after the first full moon of the equinox, which is a very pagan way to start a holiday. And the symbols that we pull out of it, like the bunnies and the chiclets and the baby stuff, the reason bunnies are there are because the bunnies are humping, my guy. Like,
yes, they are.
Yeah. They're making more bunnies. And Beltane is all about, it's about sex. And it's about having babies, or just enjoying your sexuality, and or not having babies. We'll get into that later. But it's about sex and the hypersexuality that's there. If people, especially ancient people, were going to try and make more people or more creatures, you're not really going to want to have a baby midwinter. Like, let's be real. You want to have it when it's still nice out so you can gather food for it, because, you know, you want to settle in, nurse it while it's cold out. You don't want to be in childbirth in -4 degrees.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
That's a good way of looking at that.
Yeah.
And like, if you were to conceive around May Day, it would be like
in the fall you'd be.
Yeah.
So it's safe. It's safe to have a kid then. Now we have modern technology, so you know, I kind of went off the rails there.
But that's
anyway,
what we do here.
Yeah,
so.
that's what we do. But May Day, like a big part of it is a maypole. That's one of my favorite traditions, where we used to have them when I was a kid, because that's the kind of house I grew up in. Basically, you'd get a tree, or a dead tree, and you tie ribbons all around the end, at one end, and you put it straight up, and then you can drum and you can dance around it, and you decorate this pole. And it's a fun time. Wine was had. You build a fire.
In your childhood?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, you know.
Wine was had.
I don't know. I just lit fires and stuff. So when you play outside, you enjoy this springness, this newness. And okay, sex aside, it's also a great time. It's sort of like the new moon. It's the time to set intentions for the year. It's time to clean your house, get rid of the clutter, the cobwebs, the dust that have been accumulating all winter. Shed that bullshit.
Spring
and like
cleaning.
Spring cleaning, yeah.
But like on the inside and the outside.
Yeah.
Like emotional spring cleaning, spiritual, physical, all of the
Yeah.
evils.
Take out your trash. Yeah. So yeah, that's Beltane in a nutshell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Beltane is really interesting to me, and I like what you said about the Easter holiday. Like, I always believed that Easter was like a rendition of the spring equinox, but this is the first time I've had someone kind of be like, it's also more of a Beltane thing too. It kind of happens in between those.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but really, the springtime in general is about spirituality. Spirituality? Sexuality, guys. They're the same thing.
They
right?
are. They are.
But yeah, spirituality and sexuality in modern culture have this weird way of being separated from each other. But in pagan traditions, which, by the way, were all over the world before, like, other religions took over.
Before monotheism, basically.
Yeah, like, religion actually emphasized sexuality as part of the spiritual life because that's where life comes from. So there would be no life without sexuality.
And yeah, that's sort of bleeding into that. But there, when monotheism came in, because we used to celebrate sex and death, and also the sacred feminine was really emphasized. Not that the sacred masculine wasn't, but
they were more equal.
They were equal.
Of the same thing.
With cisgender women, we have periods for the most part. Without like any underlying health concerns, which embodies sex and death. So women became a very, very powerful symbol. And the uterus, the womb, babies, all these mysterious things that happen like right here-ish, they were really fucking powerful. So when monotheism kind of sweeps through, sex and death become really fucking scary. So
especially
women,
because they didn't like. In pagan traditions, the cycle of life and death was emphasized. Whereas for whatever reason, in a lot of the monotheistic cultures, it was thought of that life is finite, and then after that there's something completely different, or there's nothing at all, or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the pagan traditions, in fact, there's this song called the Beltane song. Have you ever heard it?
No.
All right, I'm going to probably botch this because I've only heard it a few times, but it's so powerful. It's like, on a tree, there was a nest. In that nest, there was an egg. In that egg, from that egg, there came a bird. From that bird, there came a feather. From that feather, there came a mattress. On that mattress was a girl. On top of that girl, there was a man. From the man, there came a seed. From the seed, there came a boy. From that boy, grew into a man. From that man, there was a grave. And from that grave, there grew a tree. And then it just continues into the same cycle.
Yeah.
And that kind of in a nutshell was kind of what pagans believed about the cycle of life. Whether it was like direct reincarnation or whether it was just that the cycle of life continues and energy is neither created nor destroyed.
Yeah.
It's just transformed. That was like the cycle of life and death concept. But like when other religions came in and were like, nope, this is life and this is death and these are totally different things, like that was when everything kind of got crazy.
And so when you have monotheism that's very focused on what I like to call the dash, so because on a gravestone you've got your birth date and your death date, and that's it. If you have something like sex and death, like they become very scary things. If you're focused on, because sex undermines the piety to monotheism, because sex is one of the most personal things that you can do, you can share with yourself and with somebody else. It's really fucking powerful. That's why I'm a sex therapist and I talk about sex constantly. But sex and femininity and women in particular become really scary in that kind of paradigm, because they embody both sex and death within our reproductive system, with the menstrual cycle. So, I mean, I hope we don't have to go back to 8th grade health class, but we will. But when a woman is menstruating, then it's, unless it's like a medical shit that's something beyond my control. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm gonna throw that out there.
Sex therapy, gynecology, two
different things. Also, I'm not a sex surrogate, which that's a fun story, but that I'll get into. But yeah, sex therapy is different. When you're menstruating, typically people cannot get pregnant. So if your value is just like creating more little pilgrims or something like that, then what use is a woman when she cannot be pregnant? And it becomes a very scary thing that this like sex and death thing just happens all the time. Then that it's wrapped up in our biology. And that's when witch burnings come through, because women's sexuality is just deeply, deeply frightening to the medieval church. And if you read these old texts that were written about women and witchcraft, it was always about like witches were coming in, they have birds' nests full of penises wriggling around in their house, and it's just like,
I've never heard that
one.
Oh
yeah, it's from the witch's hammer. Yeah, that shit is, it's absurd. Like
there's so many crazy things.
And they were were so scared of women, in many ways. I'm not even gonna say some. In many ways, we still are today. That's why in tampon commercials, you always got this woman on a white dress spinning around like a fucking dork.
That's why the period, the period is always like blue and comes out of a vial.
Yeah, we don't want to admit that it's actually like some like gore sometimes that actually comes out of you, but it does. So yeah, Afira, she has some very strong opinions on menstruation and magic.
I do. So this is probably not going to be very exciting to people who are like, what do you use your period blood for and spells? I really don't. I haven't dabbled in that. Maybe I will. I don't know. It hasn't called to me. But the way that I do work with the menstrual cycle in magic is like, it's literally one of the core things that I do as a pagan. And to me, it's the exact same thing that we talked about in our last episode about moon cycles and sun phases, only it's your body. So, and that kind of goes into, because Asher was asking me recently, like, what if a woman doesn't get her period for whatever reason? It's really the same thing as working with the moon, or, well, particularly the moon. If you don't get your period for some reason, you can just work with the moon cycles in the exact same way that any woman would work with their period. Basically, it's those same 4 seasons. You know, you've got winter, spring, summer, and fall in the year. There's technically a miniature winter, spring, summer, and fall of the moon, even though it's not like, you can't really see it happening in nature quite as much unless you're paying super close attention. And the exact same 4 seasons happen in the woman's body. In fact, there is a woman whose work I absolutely love who has a book called 4 Seasons in 4 Weeks, and I will try and remember to link that below. The basic concept is that the beginning of the cycle is maiden phase, which corresponds to the maiden goddess. That is when you, like, your period is over, you're like feeling fresh and ready to take on the world, you're feeling kind of frisky, you're feeling creative. Yeah, you're like, woo! You know, you're feeling creative and fun and just kind of carefree. You know that you have the whole month ahead of you to do whatever you want. And then as you start ovulating, that moves into mother phase, so mother goddess. And that is pretty much where you're very creative, very nurturing, and you're like, you're just very abundant. Like anything is possible when you're ovulating. My business coach, for example, plans certain activities that involve like getting new clients and stuff like that when she's ovulating, because that's when she has a lot of creative energy, and I love that concept. And then after mother phase, you kind of start going into this decline. So mother phase is kind of like the full moon, and then it starts going into a decline. So the decline is kind of like the waning phase of the moon, or the time in the year when it's leading up to winter, like fall. And that is kind of where you're in what is called enchantress phase, which is where, yeah, this is one that not everyone knows about the enchantress. Most people do maiden, mother, crone, but I read this book called Red Moon by Miranda Gray that adds another one in there.
I'm very into this.
Yeah. Yeah. The enchantress is like, I guess as far as like goddesses are concerned, it's like the goddess version of a woman who either has already had children and they're growing up and she's more free to just have like a second wind of like being cool, or like it's like a woman who hasn't had children, is not super duper young anymore, but now she's just like coming back into her sexuality and her creativity, and she just like is really powerful, and she knows herself super well at this point. She's not a little girl anymore. She's sexy, she's cool, she's got it. And that's where like some serious magic can happen. But like it's also this concept of being aware of the fact that like the super fertile times are over, and it's kind of leading down into that death phase. So you're also kind of shedding away parts of yourself that you don't need anymore and being brave enough to do that. And then we go into crone phase, which of course is represented by the old lady goddess, or like the goddess of death. And that's where you're actually menstruating. That's the part where you're like shedding your uterine wall. You don't have to be super creative if you don't feel like it. You can kind of just sit down and emphasize what has happened in your life for the past 28 days. Like take it in, do some journaling, whatever. You don't have to go out. You don't have to do all these crazy things. You can kind of just be yourself, process your feelings, all that sort of stuff. And then, huzzah, you're the maiden again. You're reborn after your period is over. So, what do you think about that concept?
I love it, especially because we talked about, again, Wheel of the Year, because we love that-ish. But we've talked about the stillness of winter. You can't always be in bloom, and it is important. I have met other witches that, if it's possible for them, they try and work their work schedule so they don't need to work on their period. And I know people can very pejoratively say, like, oh, you're on your period and that's why you don't want to do the thing. And
it's like,
you know
not
what?
Because you're lazy, it's because you know what your energy cycle is like.
You know what? Yeah, my body's wringing out blood out of, like, it's a wet washcloth, and it's my core doing that. Yeah, like, no, I don't want to go to your dumb thing. Like, yeah, you're allowed to say that then.
Yeah.
But, yeah, people try and look down on that, but you're kind of allowed to say no then. But to kind of get back, because I want to emphasize that I don't want us to come across as biological determinists, because for people that are not cisgender female, this, like, I don't want that to be an alienating thing for them. Other parts of that are also working with masculine and feminine energies. So just because you don't have a uterus doesn't mean that that's not a magical thing that doesn't apply to your life. Because,
or even if you have one and it doesn't
do the
cycle
or
anymore.
doesn't do the cycle anymore. Whatever you're working with, the energy of your sexuality and your gender can mean something very, very much as well. While I'm a cis woman, I do know that I channel a lot of masculine energy in some ways. Like, I was Xena Warrior Princess when I was 6 for Halloween. Like, Buttercup is my favorite Powerpuff Girl. Like, I'm very much a girl, but there's still that piece of me that is very much like, fire sign, I want to go out and kick some ass and take some names.
Fire sign, my hair is bright red.
Yeah, and you can channel that too. It doesn't need to be like, it doesn't necessarily need to be like, fall into, I'm a man and so I cannot work with this feminine energy. Men can work with feminine energy.
In fact, they should.
And in fact, they might learn a thing or two if they do. Or they'd be able to teach a little bit more if they do. Balance, it's important to sort of get to know your energy, and you don't have to, just because I definitely like Xena Warrior Princess and Buttercup and like to channel that kind of raging masculine energy, doesn't mean I'm not without my like moon side, sensitive side. It just takes a while for me to show that to people. So it's understand that your energy and how you work with it, it's completely up to you. Like, there's good ways and bad ways to work with things, but really feeling natural and sort of play to your strengths, play to what calls to you. How I practice and how you practice, they're going to be different, and they don't need to be the same. So feel it yourself out. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that everybody felt welcome at the table. It doesn't always have to be about periods and stuff. You can just...
It's not like we have uteruses, you can't sit with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic because one thing that bothers me is this attitude among feminists that like women and people with uteruses are better or something like that, or like the
like radical feminists.
Yeah, like that feminine energy is more important.
Oh yeah.
Even among pagans, like I really, and sorry if I'm offending anyone here, but I really can't stand the segments of paganism that only focus on the goddess and completely devaluate the god. Like, because we wouldn't have anything without either of those energies.
You need both of them. Yeah. I mean, in my humble opinion, the things that motivate us in life are, like, sex, love, and conflict. Like, and staying alive. I mean, there's death, too.
No, I think staying alive is encompassed in those things.
Sex, love, and conflict. And people really try and shy away from conflict a lot of the time. But if it's done in a healthy way, conflict is what generates change. I think it's needed. I think that if we all lived in this fake utopia, we'd live in a passive-aggressive state, and it would bubble up worse than it would. Like, sometimes you need to set those boundaries and pull out your Ishtar side and be like, nah, bitch, like, you're gonna sit over there and you're not gonna touch me. Like, you can't just be like, haha, things are fine. So, yeah, that's part of it.
I guess that's where, like, gods of war come into play, or, like, aspects
but
of
there's
the
goddesses
feminine.
of war, too. And there's goddesses of love and war.
Like how
they
Venus
were all wrapped
caused the Battle of Troy just by, like, being too sexy.
Yeah. This stuff is, it's not all cut and dry. It all blends together. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what's really important among witchcraft practitioners in general is to just remember that even though sometimes it takes, like going into the tarot, the temperance card, temperance is about a type of balance that isn't necessarily 50-50. It's about looking at the situation and seeing what's needed to supplement it. So I completely understand why a lot of witches focus very heavily on the goddess, because they were raised in religions that completely devaluated the feminine, so they feel like they need to insert a lot of it. I think it's healthiest when people are able to focus on the fact that you have masculine and you have feminine, whether we want to look at it as gender or just look at it as the law of gender in the universe. Even though we're not talking about sex completely, you can look at it as just like positively and negatively charged particles have a certain effect on each other. And like when we think about the universe as like this giant machine, like we talked about in our last episode, that type of energy, whether it manifests in the form of a creature with certain body parts or whether it's just simply the way that energy reacts with each other, it is the only way that humans have a human experience at all is because those two energies create a sense of duality that creates something new. It creates a new experience. So I guess that's getting into some really deep stuff. But
yeah, we tend to get really existential. We're just like, yeah, let me drink some tequila and tell you about life, kids.
That's why I feel like we're a good pair, because we're not just like, oh, gods and goddesses and bunnies. It's like, we can talk about some really deep things too.
And paganism is all about deep shit. And that, like, we've touched on it a bit, but that's what part of being a witch is, you know, trying to sometimes manipulate, but bring in those energies, align yourself with the machine, but not being afraid of your finality and not being afraid of death as well, acknowledging it, that that's part of the experience. And granted, I mean, I'm not saying that if it was, my number was up right now and I found out I had some crazy terminal illness, that I would not be without fear. Like, no.
It's just about accepting that fear is part of the human experience.
It scared the soup out of me, but I'd be like, okay, now it's time to figure out what that means. Like, what does that mean? What are you leaving behind then? Because death is always going to be scary. The same way that even, like, that pregnancy is fucking scary. Like, all of that shit. All of these life changes.
They're like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Like, some people are like, oh, once you have a baby, your life is over. But, like, obviously that's new life happening, too.
Yeah,
like,
any of these life transitions. So whatever happens after this, it's not that pagans are inherently like, oh yeah, death is just the bee's knees. Like, I'm totally excited for that. But it's sort of saying, I don't know what happens next. I can't know. I know I'm going to be plant food, though. Like, something's going to happen. Whether or not my consciousness lives on, or if it's just, you know,
gets like transferred into something
you know,
else or whatever.
50, 70 years from now, if my grandkids look up these podcasts, what up, kids?
They'll be like, oh my god, Grandma was crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, what are you leaving behind? What are you helping the universe move forward in? That's
and that's super important. Like even going back to like the gender equality thing and the fact that like there's, I guess I should say, less witch burning type situations happening now. That is because,
not none, less.
But yeah, significantly less. Like there's people who came before us who made that possible, and we're thankful for the fact that like even though we'll never get to know them personally, they are living on through us having this experience, and we like that goes into like Samhain, like talking about ancestors and stuff like that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's definitely a thing. I had this sort of revelation when I was working on a giant paper in undergrad, and I wrote about witchcraft and madness and gender and like all the fun stuff, the chippy stuff that everyone likes to talk about over dinner. But I kind of came to this realization that for me as a woman, this is the first time in history that weirdos like me have been allowed to exist without being killed or thrown into shock treatment. And it's really, I'm honored that I'm able to exist on this plane and be my bad self and do a lot, not anything I want to do, but a lot of what I want to do and exist the way that I do without being persecuted by either a medical community or a religious one. So, cheers to that.
Cheers to that. And everybody at home, cheers to that too.
So yeah, kids, it's a great time to be alive.
It really is. Like seriously, we're on camera without a film crew. That's even new. Asher's got red and pink hair.
Employable, yes.
I'm a black person. Just like, there's so, like, I mean, I'm being silly, but like it really, we have so much to complain about, but at the same time, the reason why we're so aware of all these issues and we can try and tackle them quicker is because it is such a time of freedom, and that's amazing.
Yeah. So if you, speaking of that freedom, we love to talk to you. Feel free to talk to us. You can best reach us by emailing b@qweencity.com. And also thank you for the people that did reach out to us. We've had people from California and other places in Buffalo.
Other places.
I forgot where.
We got some like worldwide fan mail after our first video. We just want to say thank you guys for watching, and I'm so glad that what we're talking about resonates with you guys. And please, if you have a topic you want us to talk about, email that website.
Dazzle us. I mean, or, you know, we'll probably just do it. But yeah, thank you for watching. Finish your drinks, kids. Do some magic. We love you.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.